because you've got 3 of us here again. Myself, I'm Erica, and Megan and Julia are here as well. So we'll go ahead and get started and tell you a little bit about what you can expect on your experience with the Cleveland Museum of Natural History as part of your 2nd grade year. So right now we're standing in the lobby of the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. Now your field trip experience is broken into 2 parts. One will be a visit to the building itself, which is what we're going to start by showing you today, and that's because some of the spaces in our buildings close right at 5, so we want to make sure we have a chance to show you everything that's here before we start losing access to the cool stuff. But what will happen first chronologically in your school year is the museum's actually coming out to your classroom. So we're going to save the last 20 minutes or so of the presentation today to show you what that experience will be like as well. So we've got 2 parts. We're starting with the museum exploration itself. So we will, one other thing to warn you in advance. We are going to lose Wi-Fi periodically throughout the presentation today as we move into different spaces. So whenever we lose our connection, we will stop, wait for our device to reconnect with the Wi-Fi, and we should have you back within a matter of seconds. So just stay tuned when that happens. We're aware of it on our end and are going to be waiting to reconnect before sharing any additional information. Okay, so last time we had a lot of trouble standing outside, but I'm going to at least move to the vestibule area so you can see what the bus turnaround space looks like. So this is our lobby. When the bus drops off the students, these are the doors that you'll be coming in through. And just out these doors, there's a circle turnaround there that your bus driver will pull all the way up into
she'll freeze and she knows she's frozen, so it's just let you know, it'll take a few minutes and then like, all right, and then she'll know exactly where she is because it gets close on here.
and using quiet indoor voices. Sometimes we'll compare the museum to a library because people are here to learn. So even though we're going to see some really cool, exciting things and we want to have a lot of fun, it's important to do that in respectful ways so that the other groups who might be visiting here and the other 2nd graders from Akron are all able to enjoy their experience. So at that point, the students will be getting off the bus, coming inside, and we'll have bins stationed here in the lobby for you. These are for the students to put their lunch for the day and possibly coats or jackets if it's a colder day as well. Your educator will be here in the lobby to meet the group and take you on your first excursion of the day. And they'll also show you where the lunches are being stored so that you're able to get to them at the end of your program, and then you can eat in our designated lunch space. Any questions so far just about arriving at the building and how you'll be bringing the students inside?
No, we're good.
Okay, I'm gonna keep walking, but chat. Oh, somebody is typing. I will wait.
No, we're good. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so then once your educator greets the group, you'll be starting at one of 3 activities. And this basically depends on how many students are coming with your school. We have one educator for up to 30 students that arrive. So if you have 2 2nd grade classrooms at your school, each with 20, 25 students, there'll be 2 museum educators here waiting to greet you. The museum visit is broken up into 3 parts: a gallery tour, which lasts about an hour, the Perkins Wildlife Tour, which lasts about 40 minutes, and then a touch table component, which is about 20 minutes. So altogether, they're here with a museum educator for 2 hours from 10 to 12. Then you go on your lunch break and have some time to explore the building afterwards. So because our outdoor space closes first, we're going to start by looking outside at Perkins. If that is the first thing your group is doing for the day, they would keep their coats on their bodies if it was cold, because this part of our museum is open most of the time. Occasionally it closes for really bad weather or icy walkways, but we do go out there even in the winter months. So please make sure your students are wearing appropriate clothing to be outdoors for about 40 minutes. The space we're walking through now is our Finding Lucy gallery. The exhibits in this space change, so it likely will not be here when you show, maybe. Actually, now I'm not sure how long this exhibit is here. Some of you may get a chance to see this live and in person, and if you do not, there will be something else here in its place, showcasing some of the science and research going on in the area. Okay. So just up ahead is the Perkins Wildlife Center. And before we take the students outside, we usually pause and group them up either over here or basically just near the entrance, but before we get outside where it gets distracting with the animals. And we'll try to remind them of some of the things they may have been learning already in school. Things like what a habitat is and what the basic needs of animals are. We may talk a little bit about where these animals came from that we're about to go and see. They are all native to Ohio. They don't all live in the Cleveland area, although most can be found nearby. And they are all living here at the museum only because they can no longer care for themselves in the wild, or because they were raised from humans from early baby stages of their lives and wouldn't know how to survive on their own. As we go outside, we'll be reminding the students again to stay together in a group. Your museum educator gets to be in front because they know all the best stopping points. And we want to keep our voices quiet even when we're outside, because loud noises can spook the animals, making it harder for us to see what is going on. And it can also stress them out. So we want to be respectful of the animals and get a good view. So then we'll actually go peek outside a little bit, see if the Wi-Fi will cooperate with us. And sometimes on the way out, we'll point out the
Nope, we lost her. It'll pick back up.
Okay, so one of the first things that your students will see when they come outside is right over the edge of the railing here, there are some coyotes. Oh, and there they are walking around. Excellent. There are different enclosures like this all around the space. And our Perkins Wildlife Center is laid out like almost like a series of loops. So the educator will take them around on a pathway that ends up circling back right here to this same spot. So they either see the coyotes first or at the end of their trip, depending on which way they go. But this sign here will give you some ideas of the types of animals that are out here. Highlights include the bobcat, the river otters. We've got a porcupine who is super adorable. Gray fox, red fox. I should also give the disclaimer that the porcupine is not out here in the winter months. He is a little bit of a baby and gets to stay indoors when it gets cold. But everybody else does stay out here year round because they're native to this area and have the right adaptations to be able to live here comfortably. And you may also notice that there's some shelter and other enclosures in their spaces as well to help. One of the things we ask the students to look for while they're outside are examples of how the animals at the museum are meeting their basic needs and how these enclosures might mimic their natural habitat in a wild space. We occasionally get lucky and see the wildlife team out here caring for the animals as well, which gives a nice opportunity for some career connections and to point out how these animals are cared for at the museum that's unique to our space, and compare that to how they would get their own food, water, and shelter in the wild. Again, they're out here for about 40 minutes, sometimes a little bit less if the bus is a couple minutes late, or if it's very cold, we'll adjust the length to make sure everybody is comfortable and safe. But does anyone have any questions about the Perkins space? I'm going to take a peek at my schedule here, see how we're doing and what time it is.
Are they all out there at once?
Oh, great question. So we split the group up. Your class will stay together. So if you remember back from that original example where there was a fictional 2 groups coming from Akron, 1 museum educator with each, typically one group will start outside in Perkins and the other group will start on the gallery tour, and then they switch. Perkins and the touch table, which we'll look at next, take about an hour of time when put together, and the gallery also takes an hour. So those make really good chunks to do separately and then swap places. There might be other classrooms out here though. It's actually a very popular part of several of our programs. And in those cases, the museum educators coordinate ahead of time so that they take different routes through the space. It's hard to see what's going on if you have any more than 20 to 30 students all trying to get a look at something at once. And our educators do have some strategies for filtering students through so that everyone gets a chance to see and understand what's going on. Any other questions? Okay, these are playing. Okay, good. It's humid out here, so let's go back inside. Guess I can't make fun of the porcupine for being a baby if I'm going to complain about the heat. Oh, Perkins is, I believe the whole thing is wheelchair accessible. The only exception being like getting up to where the slide is and a couple of the like the playground-esque components that we don't go to as part of this program anyway. But yeah, the whole thing is wheelchair accessible. And in the building, we do have an elevator to get downstairs to where our lower exhibits are, but all of the programming happens on the main level. So the only time you may need to do that is if you're eating in one of our classroom spaces, which will be true in winter and spring. So once the students come inside, they can take off their jackets and adjust to the indoor space. Otherwise, we bring them inside to our classroom just up ahead where we'll have a touch table set up. Now, this is a health classroom and theme, so you'll notice a lot of health props around the room as well. But with the students, we're going to be directing them to the touch table items in the back. Oh, Erica.
Hit me in the face. Oh, okay. All right. So when you come into the health classroom, there are some really cool things all around that are health related, but they are not things that we're focusing on. If there is enough time, I mean, I'll answer questions about it because it's hard not to see this stuff. And what we might do is, and I think this was suggested the other day, but maybe cover these things up.
It's pretty
I think that was a suggestion that was made. So I don't know. Are you thinking that that's what we'll end up doing, Erica? At least this wall. It might depend on the group. Okay, that sounds good. So anyway, when you come in here for the touch table, there is an answer key for you teachers to use. And the questions that are on here correspond with the questions that are on the table. So like this one says, mammoths were grazers that ate grass. Mastodons were browsers that ate leaves and twigs. which tooth belonged to a mammoth and which tooth belonged to a mastodon. So on your answer key, the mammoth tooth is labeled mammoth, which is this one right here. And the mastodon tooth is labeled with a picture and it's labeled mastodon tooth. And it explains the different things that they ate so that if your educator, who will be in the room with you, but if they're off helping another student with something else or answering a similar question somewhere else in the room, you're able to still answer these questions if your students should think of anything like these. Or if they're looking at the questions that are on the table, you're able to answer these specific questions at least. Okay? Two of the main things that we're focusing on is comparing animals that are alive today to animals that are no longer alive, that are extinct. So extinction is a big theme that we're going to be talking about with the touch table, but also throughout our gallery tour. And if they got to go out to Perkins first, then they haven't gotten to see the gallery yet. And this is, you know, this is all going to be new to them. They'll recognize some of the things like the feathers. They'll recognize things from today, but they may not know much about anything from the past, the extinct animals. So this is a really good way to whet their appetites for what they're going to see when they go into the galleries. If they already went into the gallery, this is really a good way to kind of recenter them, say, okay, we saw all these really cool extinct animals. Now we're going to go outside and we're going to learn about animals that are alive today. We're going to compare them a little bit to these animals that used to be alive. But they'll be able to at least have a general idea of, you know, these animals that lived long ago in the Cleveland area, how different they are from the animals that are still alive and still on this planet today. Another term that we want to go over with them is fossil. It's a really big one. When we go through the galleries, we do focus on fossils. That is basically 40 minutes of our gallery tour focus on our fossils. Some of the things that they'll see in the galleries when they're walking around are things like this T-Rex tooth. So they'll recognize, when they go out to the galleries, they'll recognize this tooth and they'll get to see it again. This Dunkleosteus jaw. Dunkleosteus was a prehistoric fish that lived in the Cleveland area 360 million years ago. And we find his jaws here, which is really cool. But they'll get to touch this in here, and they'll also get to see it in the gallery, and they'll get to see a whole skull of Dunkleosteus. So there will be one side of the table, or one side, I think we're doing 2 tables, correct? So these might be mixed in, or it's kind of educators' preference how they want to set up their table. But we do have, you know, a mix of the prehistoric things and the extant things. So however the educator wants to set it up, whether it's a mix of things or like having things separated by extant versus extinct, it's totally up to them. But it is cool for them to be able to compare in real time, you know, things alive today to things that are no longer living. And also get to use little tools like this cute little Cleveland Museum of Natural History tape measure, and look at cool animals, ones we don't even actually have in Perkins, like this black bear skull and a black bear pelt. So they'll get to touch tons of things. And we have a whole bin of things over here that we didn't have enough space on this table for, but there's all kinds of really good stuff in here. It's a bin of secret awesome things. So the animals that they don't get to touch outside, they get to come inside and they get to touch the furs and learn a little bit more about these animals. Okay. Do you guys have any questions at all?
I think it's still in groups here. There's several tables.
No.
Yeah.
No, so the entire classroom will not be in here at a time. This room cannot accommodate all those children at one time, but there will be, depending on the size of your class. So whatever class starts with that educator, they'll stay with them the whole day. So throughout each activity.
Can you explain that the tables are a lot bigger than that?
Yeah. So do you want to show them this? So this table is just an example table, and this isn't everything that's going to be put out. We'll have probably 2 tables roughly like this size, like 6-foot tables. I think this is like a 6-foot table. And they'll be parallel to each other, and the kids can walk up and down almost like aisles. And they'll be able to more easily interact with the different specimens that we put out. Hope that answered your question. But yeah, there won't be all the kids in here at once. There'll be like max 30.
Another question.
Mhm.
How long is the touch table portion?
20 minutes. It's a 20-minute portion of the program. So 20 in here, 40 in Perkins, and an hour in the galleries.
Anything else about that piece? Good.
Okay, if you have any other questions, yeah, go ahead and bring them up at another point in the intro to this program. I'm stuck, guys. I'm so stuck. Here you go.
Trade you again.
It's stabilizing itself. Let's see. Maybe. How should I hold it?
Thanks for holding on there. Our camera stabilizer just got a little wiggly, but I think it's back.
It's trying. Hold on. Finding who it needs to find.
All right. So all right, we got our camera back. So next, after Perkins and the touch table, the group will be going to the gallery tour, or alternatively, they may have started there and would be doing things in reverse order. But that's what I'm going to show you next. So the gallery spaces that we visit, there's 2 main rooms that we go into. One is full of taxidermied animals, so modern day species, to look at what habitats look like around the world today. And the other is our prehistoric gallery full of fossils and extinct remains of animals. We spend most of the time in the room with the fossils, but we do a little bit of in the fossil room and about 20 minutes in the taxidermied animal room. And those titles I just made up for those galleries will make more sense when we when we walk into the spaces and you see what they look like. So just to orient you where we are in the building now, we're back in that main lobby where you would have come in. Oh, and just as a side note, because I forgot to mention this before, there is a restroom in this corner when you first walk in as well. And there's one by that health classroom where we do the touch table activity. So if you are arriving and you know your students are going to need a restroom break before we get started, let the museum educator know who's meeting your group. And that's a normal part of our day. So we are ready to wait if that's what your group needs. All right, so in the space up ahead, this is it's called the Sears Gallery, but it is full of taxidermied animals. Students almost always ask if they are real and how we got them and if they're dead and just what the deal is with these displays. So they are real, but they're not alive. And that's something the educator will answer when asked that question. And I like to describe taxidermy as sort of like a statue where the inside parts that would rot away and get really stinky have been replaced with that statue component, something like a statue that then gets the original fur, teeth, claws, the parts of the animal that were original to it when it was alive, added back on. When they're in here, the students are tasked with looking at a particular environment. I'm wearing one of the clipboards that the students will get as part of their experience. And this first page here just has 2 boxes. One is labeled the tropical rainforest, and the other is labeled the Arctic. So one of our first stops in this space is, of course, the tropical rainforest. Over here in the display labeled as South America. The basic layout of this room is that each window represents a different habitat or region of the world. And so we chose 2 that would have very distinct animal adaptations for the students to compare while they are here. So they'll come in, they'll sit on the floor right in front of this display, or possibly in front of the Arctic to start instead. And then the educator leads them through a series of observation-based questions to encourage them to look very closely at what they're seeing in this case. Now, things are behind glass in here, so we don't have any props at this particular station. And so we're asking them to use their eyes and tell us what they're noticing. So what do they see? What do they recognize? What are they curious about? Where might these animals get the food they need to survive? Which of these images or pieces of the display might make a good shelter? Then after they've made some basic observations as a group, they look at their, we call the worksheets a scientist notebook or a field journal, whatever catchy phrase the educator feels like using that day. They'll draw a picture of what they see in the tropical rainforest, one animal and a piece of its habitat, so that they have something to remember this first stop by. I usually draw the snake because that's the easiest one to draw. But some of the student drawings turn out really nice. So they have a couple minutes to observe, look closely, draw. And then if there is time, remember we only spend about 20 minutes in this gallery, and occasionally some of that time is eaten up by things like restroom breaks or getting coats on or off or passing out these clipboards. But we always try to actually sit and visit both spots. Sometimes we're able to do both. Sometimes we send the students home with a blank rectangle that they then investigate on their own to compare to what they saw at the museum. But either way, we at least walk past the Arctic. So let's go take a look at that now. I like to have the students imagine that they're actually traveling to the Arctic and that they can feel the temperature getting colder. Sometimes the air conditioning is cold enough in this room that it actually feels like the Arctic. So we might do things like zip up our winter coat or put on our boots or our hats. Maybe do some shivering to show that we're cold. And then look up ahead. I see our destination. So just like before, the students will come and have a seat on the floor. They're making visual observations about what they see, but this time we have something to compare it to. So how are these animals different than the one we saw in the tropical rainforest? How is the land that the animals are living on different? Some observations we try to draw out of the students are, for instance, the size of the animals. The polar bear and the musk oxen are very large. They have a lot of fat and fur to keep them warm. Also, the colors of the animals, browns, grays, whites, are really going to help with camouflage. And those are things that the students will tell us, those ideas of needing to be warm in the Arctic, needing to blend into their surroundings. It's our job as the museum educator to get them there by making those observations first. So then if time allows, they'll draw a picture in the Arctic as well. And then they'll have their 2 drawings to help compare and remind them how animals get their basic needs from their habitat, and those adaptations of the animals help them survive in those spaces. After a couple minutes of drawing, we then transition into the room with all the dinosaur fossils, which is where we spend most of our time on this gallery tour. And on our way, we walk past Balto, which I understand is something that you all read about. So we do have the original Balto on display at the museum. He is taxidermied here, right in this case. So since you all read about him as part of the 2nd grade curriculum, this is a nice stop to walk past and wave a hello to Balto. And if that is a relevant point in the curriculum when you're visiting the museum, please let your museum educator know, just to remind them that that's something you want to see. It's very convenient for us to add into the program, but since it's not something we always do, we may not remember unless you remind us. This hallway we're walking through now it has a lot of our Native American items on display. The bones in that display case are not real. They are cast. And actually quite a few of the prehistoric displays we're about to see are also cast. Once we get into this room, just around the corner here, whoa, you can see all the dinosaur fossils. And usually this is a really exciting moment for the class because we call ourselves a dinosaur museum sometimes to help explain where we are because of this room. So we've got some dinosaurs on display and some other prehistoric animals too. We're not just talking about dinosaurs at this stop. The students are tasked with matching some examples of prehistoric animals. We've got a mastodon, a T-Rex, this Dunkleosteus, which we saw that example of the jaw from earlier at the touch table, Glyptodon, and an ammonite. And they're matching those to animals that are still alive today. So we have three main stops that we take in this space. And I'll kind of point out where they are. We won't do the full stops, of course, because I want to save time for you to see what the classroom visit portion of your experience looks like too. But one of our stops is over here in the Ice Age corner, where we have that Glyptodon and a mastodon skull, plus a diorama of what life might have looked like in the Ice Age. These animals did not live on the glaciers that were in Ohio. They lived in the land nearby. Even though much of the state was covered by ice, they still would have passed through it. And at each of these stops that I'm pointing out, here, even though the main displays are behind glass, the educator does have props that will be out in front. So very similar to the items that we saw on the touch table earlier, there'll be things like mastodon teeth, T-Rex teeth, Dunkleosteus jaw, those items that can be held up as a reminder of what they just touched at the touch table and also passed around again if time allows. We've got to stop at the dinosaurs here to check out our meat-eating T-Rex and plant-eating Triceratops. And we're asking the students to sort of imagine what the habitat may have looked like in this case and what sort of resources would needed to be around for these dinosaurs to live. And then our other main stop in this fossil room. This is called our Kirtland Hall, but it is the room with the fossils. Our other main stop is just past this guy. This is a model of Dunkleosteus, and he is not a shark, even though it looks, a lot of people think he is. He is a meat-eating fish. And Dunkleosteus lived during the Devonian period. So long, long, long ago. He is older than the dinosaurs and the geologic record. And Dunkleosteus fossils are found right here in the Cleveland area. So we've got some of the actual fossils on display over here in the case. These fossils were found during a highway construction project, I believe in the 70s. But scientists come from all over for the museum's collection of Dunkleosteus and other placoderms. All right, so then once we've made those stops and the students have made their connections, connecting the animals that are extinct with the ones that are still alive today, we either take you to where your lunch space will be for the day if you're at the end of your program, or outside of Perkins if you're flip-flopping. Again, the whole museum experience is about 2 hours from 10 to 12, the whole guided portion of the experience. Then at noon, your educator will help you figure out where you're going to eat lunch for the day, and then you'll have a chance to explore the museum afterwards with your students on your own. We are going to walk back to the health classroom right now because that's where our next activity is set up to show you. So remember, you are interacting with us in two ways. You are coming to the museum to do the activities we just modeled, but the museum is also coming to you. So once we get back to the health classroom, you'll get a chance to see what that experience is like. As we're walking, do you have any questions about the museum portion as a whole? This is the touch table. The students that touch on.
I didn't put it in there.
Woohoo!
For you, I
Gold
have
star to
it.
whoever asked that question. We love when teachers want to help. So
I'll post
that's
it.
stable. We've got those answer keys, so you're able to jump in and help your students interact. Generally posing any kind of questions to the kids. What do you notice? What do you think? Helping them make connections to what they're seeing here with what you may have been going over in class. All of those activities will help strengthen the connections that they're making and the way that they're able to remember the material. We also always need help with communicating instructions to the students and expectations. So as we're moving from place to place, please help us keep an eye on your group.
Oh, we lost her. She'll come back.
We want you to have a good time too. Any other questions about the museum experience as a whole? For who to know what's going on. Oh, as part of this, you have some extension activities you can do back in your classroom. And some of them are prediction based, like what you think about some different prehistoric animals. And those, some of them we see in the gallery here. And then the post activities to do once you are back include some different links to resources on our website to help explore what our practicing scientists are up to. So the more you can remember and pull from your students' brains about the experience, the more they'll understand what those resources are about too.
Another question, how much time, if any, do students have to explore on their own?
So that part happens after lunch. So some of that depends on how quickly your group eats. Typically we reserve the lunch space for you for about half an hour, so from 12 to 12:30. If you're done before that, that's extra explore time. If you take until 12:30, that's okay. But I've got to be honest, I forget what time your buses come to pick you up. That might be a better question for Marcy. But we are done with your group at noon. In the spring and winter, you will have a designated lunch time, so it will be really important that you eat within that 12 to 12:30 window. And our scheduler will communicate all of that with you while he's making the final arrangements for your visit. But then after that, the day is yours to explore with your students. Please don't send them exploring truly on their own, but I assume you meant as a group or with a parent chaperone or another teacher that may be with the group too.
Your bus is picking you back up at 1. So
Any other
you have
questions?
a half an hour, maybe 20 minutes, half an hour to go check out some exhibits. Just what you do on the bus. 1.
Okay, I'm gonna start taking this microphone off to hand it to Megan.
All right, so I'm Megan.
If they want to
We're going to head back into the health classroom just to talk about the portion of this trip where we come out to your school and do a program. So like I said, the other component of this whole Akron Essential Experiences is that we come out and do a program with you guys in Akron. Likely, chances are it'll be either me or Julia, who you saw earlier at the touch table teaching your class. Those start next week. We're very excited. But we just want to kind of run through the program real quick with you so you kind of know what to expect with your students. These are done on a classroom basis. So say, for example, again, your school has 2 second grade classes. We'll do one for an hour, and then we'll transition and teach the second one for another hour. Usually it's best if we stay in one space, so like, you know, classroom, library, whatever it is, and have the kids transition through us if you do have more than one class. It just makes it easier for us in terms of, you know, setting up, taking down, that kind of thing. But if you need us to transition from room to room, that's certainly fine too. It's just a little bit easier if we don't have to. Trying to think of other logistics. We usually get there about a half hour early to set up. Let's see, we have a PowerPoint that goes along with this, so we can either use a computer and projector that you already have set up, or we can bring our own. Both are good options. And this is a group-based activity, so kind of depending on how your room is set up, how many kids you have, but 6 to 8 groups is usually what we ask for, kind of somewhere in there. So like I said, I'll just kind of briefly go over what the program is so you guys know. Our program is called Dino Detectives. So this talks all about dinosaurs. That's what we're going to be. We are paleontologists with the kids. We travel out to our site in Alberta, Canada. And what our goal is we're trying to figure out what this mystery dinosaur is that we have found. So we look for clues along the way to help us kind of narrow down what our dinosaur is. So in an introduction, we talk about, you know, paleontology, what our museum researchers do. We introduce the words fossils and extinct and dinosaur if your students haven't learned that before, and just make sure everyone's on the same page. And then we have 4 different clues that we go through. And again, these are group-based. So just for example, clue number 1, these are little mini dig pits that we have. So there's just pretend dirt in here, and kids working together in teams, of course, because scientists work in teams. They carefully brush away the pretend dirt from the fossils. It's a little hard to do at an angle, but you get the idea. And then they draw what they've found. So we take them through the steps that paleontologists do to kind of figure out what these dinosaurs are. So they uncover the fossils, and then they draw the fossil bones from your site. So a little bit of science, a little bit of art. Let's see. Some of the other clues that we go through. And again, there's a PowerPoint that goes along with this that kind of helps flesh some of this out. But we do talk about, for example, we talk about teeth. So we talk about carnivores and herbivores, and we compare a fossil tooth from our mystery dinosaur. We can compare it to teeth from modern day animals to help us figure out what kind of diet our mystery dinosaur had. And to go along with it, this is always the part that the kids giggle the most at. We talk about coprolites, which are fossilized animal poop, which again always gets the giggles, but it's fun. We just have like crafts, you know, paper mache kind of coprolites, but kids get to reveal the meal, make sure that they double check their answer of what diet the animal did have. Let's see, we talk about footprints, because those are kind of unusual fossil to find, but pretty cool and pretty, they can provide some really good clues. And as part of that, we look at, this is a fossil cast, so a copy, but a fossil toe bone from our mystery dinosaur, which is pretty cool. We also pull out a giant footprint as part of that. And then lastly, we talk about fossil jackets, which is how fossils are brought to the museum so that they don't break. These are just like little pretend ones, but it's kind of like when you get a cast, if you break a bone and go to the doctor, it's kind of similar to what these are. So we look for the clues on that, and we use these handy dandy field journals, just like real paleontologists do, to help us narrow down, look at our records and figure out what kind of dinosaur we have and what body part. So the kids end the program by solving the mystery. They figure out what the mystery dinosaur is, and we kind of tie that back into habitats at the very end. Like I said, I know that was kind of like a very brief overview of it, but again, this is the Dino Detectives program that we do at your schools in Akron. Any questions about that? Or about anything else we've talked about?
Any questions for the Dino Detectives piece? Look good? Makes sense? Okay.
I think we are okay. All right. Do you want to wrap up, Erica? All right, I'm going to hand this back over to Erica for just a second. There you go.
All right, so again, just as a reminder, outreach portion happens first. That's in the fall, where we come out to your school. We bring all of this cool dinosaur stuff. Then later on, you guys come out to us in the museum. You should be getting those dates and times from our scheduler if you haven't already, because I know we are getting started very soon. We're very excited to meet you and your students. And yeah, if you have any questions, you can always reach out and ask us at any point. You should have our scheduler's contact information throughout that process. And I know Marcy has mine as well. And I'm going to open it up for questions one last time. If you have any final questions. Oh, yes. Okay. So we have some career-focused programming this year. And Museum Mondays is the old title. It's gotten rebranded this year. So we're calling them Careers in STEM. It's a much less catchy name, I'm sorry. But I'm going to call it the Careers in STEM series. And there's two parts. One is in conjunction with our Science Explorer lecture series. So the lectures are definitely for adults. Those take place here at the museum. But the video portion is our museum educator, Lee Gamble, who is fabulous, doing a live Q&A session with the scientists that come in. So her job is really to pull information out of them in a way that's easy for students to understand. Now it is geared towards school-age audiences. We are marketing it most heavily to high school or middle school audiences because at that point they're definitely thinking about careers. But we do encourage your second graders to log in and watch too, because Lee is there as essentially a science translator. They should still be able to follow along with what's going on, and we welcome their questions. They happen on select Fridays at 1 p.m. The first one is tomorrow, so we are excited to test that out. Now, our flyer production was delayed this year because we've been switching a lot of electronic equipment around. But Marcy should have the link of our website that directs you to the videos to watch. You can watch them live with us if you're available, but they'll also be recorded for you to pull up and preview just to make sure it's something you want to show your students. Maybe you have some other resources you want to throw in as well, or to watch with your students whenever you would like. There are quite a few of those scheduled throughout the year. The full list of speakers is on the website. We also have a second sub-series, also Careers in STEM, that focus more on field scientists. And this one is funded through the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District. So it includes some of the museum's practicing scientists and also some of the sewer district practicing scientists. But the same sort of format where it's a Q&A interview style format to get at how these people got their jobs and what it is that they do. Any other questions?
Question, hold on.
Okay.
Is there a restroom that the aides can take children to? Female aide with a male student.
So we have our regular restrooms throughout the building that typically have like 3 to 6 stalls in them. There is a family restroom that is on the lower level. It is accessible by wheelchair. That has more space. So if it's a student in a wheelchair or otherwise needs a larger space, that would be the best option. And one of the museum educators who's meeting your group can point that out right away when you arrive. Essentially, it's right at the elevator exit, so it's pretty easy to get to. And there are 2. Any other questions?
Anything else about that, logistics or anything about the site? We're good. She showed you guys where to pull up and park and all that good stuff. And I went to go make those copies. Okay.
And I do have a question for you guys, which is just how many people are there watching on your end today? So I can let our schedulers know how many people.
8,
This
9,
was
10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 people today.
So much. 16 people today.
great. All right. Well, thank you. Please reach out if you think of any questions, and we're excited to meet you guys very, very soon.